Hey, Base Camp kids, Pastor Pat here at Summit Church, coming at you again. As you can tell, I like to stay physically fit. I'm a runner, do a lot of running, but I have never done nearly as much running as a lady that I was reading about recently. She ran a race called the Ahey Ultra Trail Run. This is by Medora, North Dakota, and I've run races over there, but not this one. It's a trail run through the Badlands of North Dakota, 106 miles. 106 miles. See, and I thought I was doing a lot when I ran 8 or 10 or 11. Nothing. 106 miles. It can take over 30 hours of non-stop running to complete this race. They start it Saturday morning while it's still dark, and they get done Sunday evening as it's starting to get dark again. That is a long race. Now, this lady that I was reading about, she ran this race. She got second in it last summer. And she was running this thing. She's actually in the military. So she runs these ultra marathons, these super long races, to promote the military. And she had just done a really long race, like a 100-mile race. And she had gotten back. She had a bit of an injury, so she wanted to nurse that back to health before doing the next one. And the military called her up and was like, hey, there's this race down in North Dakota through the Badlands, 106 miles. We think you should go. Well, when you're in the military and they tell you they think you should go, you go. So she went, even though she hadn't time to completely recover, she was still injured, she went and she ran this race. So she's recovering from an injury. She starts in the cold dark. Now, the Badlands of North Dakota are kind of like a desert, and so when it's dark out, it gets cold. But in the daytime, when the sun's blazing down on you, it gets blazing hot. So she ran through super cold night, she ran through blazing hot sun, she ran up these huge hills. The elevation gain is tremendous. She came across a rattlesnake once. She's like, yeah, we'll go that side of the trail. She does a rattlesnake. At one point, she accidentally made a wrong turn, so she had to backtrack and go back again. That was in the dark. And then she had to run across and through a river, not over a bridge, through the river. Through the river. No grandmother's house on the other side. She had to go through the river. She was alone through most of it. They allow you to have a pace runner, somebody run along with you, for the second 50 miles, but not till you get through the first 50 miles. So she did all of that. She's running, and she said through all those things, she never felt like she wanted to quit. Even with the pain in her leg from her injury, even through the cold, even through the rattlesnake, even through the river, she never wanted to quit. But she said she felt like she was nearing the end, and she made a mistake. There was somebody cheering from the sidelines, and she yells over to them and goes, hey, how much farther do we have to go? And the lady on the side yelled back, just 2 more miles. Now realize this is a 106-mile race. She's already run at least 104 miles. 104 miles, and the lady says, just 2 more miles to go. The lady running said at that moment, she just wanted to quit. She wanted to give up completely. She's like, I'm never gonna finish this thing. I'm never gonna reach the finish line. She's already run 104 miles, and 2 miles is too much for her. Now the reality is the person that yelled that was wrong. She was only a quarter of a mile from the finish line. That's much less than 2 miles. It's just once around the track at the high school is usually a quarter mile. She was that close, and she said she almost quit right there. In fact, she started to stop running, started to want to just cry, but she's like, no, I can do this. And she got going, and she got all the way across the line and crossed the finish line, got second place in that race that day. She goes, you know, if I wouldn't have almost given up, I might have actually caught the person in front of me. But she managed to keep going. Now that is a run. Now sometimes when you're nearing the end, you feel like quitting. It always seems to get the hardest when you're nearing the end. Jesus experienced something similar to that. He was in the Garden of Gethsemane just before Good Friday. He's in there, he's praying, and do you remember his prayer? He says, Lord, take this cup away from me. And he's crying and he's sweating, like drops of blood are coming off of him. And he's going, I don't know if I can do this, but not my will, but yours be done. And he ended up pushing through that with strength from God, strength from his Father, strength from the Holy Spirit. He pushed through that, and he made it through to the next day. Now, it wasn't over. That was his weakest mental moment that we're aware of in scriptures, but it wasn't over because the next day is when it really got hard. So he endured the trial, the beatings, the torture, the humiliation, and finally the agony of the cross. He never gave up until it was finished. And then in John chapter 19, verses 29 and 30, we read his comment here. And this is what it says. A jar of wine vinegar was there. So they soaked a sponge in it, put the sponge on a stalk of the hyssop plant, and lifted it to Jesus' lips. When he had received the drink, Jesus said, "It is finished." With that, he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. I've never run 106 miles. The longest I've ever run is around 16 miles or so. And that was to raise money for Speed the Light, our teens missions program. I've also done many endurance races and other races. I've run 5Ks, which is a little over 3 miles, 10Ks, which is a little over 6 miles. I've run a 5-mile race. I've run endurance races that involve going over obstacles and through rivers and this kind of stuff. And they've been 12 miles and 14 miles. And the first endurance race I ever ran was the Tough Mudder. I ran this back, around 2012 or so. I ran the Tough Mudder. And as I ran that race, I trained and got ready for that race. It was 12 miles long. They promoted it as being the toughest event on the planet. The toughest event on the planet. It involves going through ice water, through rivers, up hills, down hills, through tunnels, climbing walls, even hanging electrodes that if you touch them, you get zapped. You have to belly crawl through the mud underneath barbed wire. More electrodes hanging down. If you touch those, okay, it'll just get you. It is pain, it is hard, it is difficult. But I did it, and I did it to raise money for Speed the Light for missions. And when I got done, this is what I got. Oh yeah, baby. Can you check this thing out? It's a genuine Tough Mudder headband. Beautiful orange colors. Okay, so this is what I got, this Tough Mudder headband. Now, I want you to know about this. They advertise this thing. You cannot buy these online. You cannot get one of these. The only way to receive a Tough Mudder headband is to earn it. So if you ever see somebody wearing one of these, it means they completed a Tough Mudder race. You have to earn this when it is finished. Jesus hung on the cross. He went through all of that. And when it was finished, he had earned something for you, for me, and for himself. Jesus earned this. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 2, part B, says, for the joy set before him, so for the joy set before Jesus, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. So we need to rejoice. We're coming up on Easter. We rejoice because Jesus has done it all and has declared it is finished once and for all. He has allowed us to enter into the presence of God and into heaven for all of eternity because he accomplished it and hung on the cross and declared it is finished. Now that is something to rejoice in. That is really cool. But that is not all. Because not only did he get all that for us, but he also set an example for us that we need to follow. Remember, we just read from Hebrews chapter 12, verse 2, part B. Well, let's get the whole thing in context. Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 through 3, and this is what it said. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. We need to follow Jesus' example. We need to keep pressing on and finish what he's called us to do. Remember Jesus' example. Now, he didn't just wake up one day and go to the cross like, I think I'll go get crucified today. No, he spent his whole life training for that moment. And the last 3 years of his life intensely training for that moment and getting ready and getting prepared. When I did the Tough Mudder, I was running 7.5 to 10 miles a day to get ready. I was lifting weights. I was swimming an hour a day without letting my feet touch the bottom of the swimming pool. I would take my oldest son to the park, and while he was playing, I would do pull-ups on the monkey bars, just so that I could get ready and train for this. I did that for months, so that way when it came time, I was ready to do the Tough Mudder. Well, how do we train to do what God has called us to do, to follow the example that Jesus set? Well, we need to read our Bibles. We need to pray. We need to be at church. Even if you can't come to the church building, like what's going on right now, still tune in online. Be connected with other people in the church so that they can encourage you and you can encourage them. We need to be loving and serving. Well, isn't that what I'm training for? Yeah, but you know what? We train by doing. Races involve running. So you know what I do? I run. That's what we need to do to train. We train by doing. And to stay motivated, we need to remember why we're doing it. I think of when I'm training for BGMC or Speed the Light, fundraisers, races, whatever I'm doing, I think of the missionaries. I think of the people that are going to be helped, that are going to be saved, that are going to be rescued because of what they're doing, the money that I'm raising for them. When I'm getting tired in the middle of a long run, that's what I think about so I can keep going and press on. Jesus did it for the joy set before him. What was the joy set before him so that he could get all the way through and declare it as finished? His joy set before him was two things. One, an eternal relationship with you. And two, his relationship with his Father. That's the motivation that we need to have as well. Other people, our Father in heaven. Jesus finished it all for us. When he died on the cross, he died so that you and I can have a relationship with him for eternity. He finished all of that for us. But then he calls us to live the life that he set an example of. So we need to follow his example and finish what he's called us to do. And to do that, we've got to train and we've got to keep focused. I'm Pastor Pat here at Base Camp at Summit Church. Love you guys. I miss you. It's hard being in an empty room. Can't wait to see you here again. And make sure that you like and follow and share this video so that way other people can be encouraged to find out that Jesus finished for them on the cross as well, and now they can follow his example and live in an eternal relationship with him too.